It's your boy Slick What Ifs. I chose to make this because I couldn't sleep, so yeah. This is what if Deku had a gigantification quirk. So it showed that he had a kind of mutation quirk where he's giant all the time. And that made it where he's, like in this picture, a monster compared to everyone else. And he works out like normal humans, but I'm gonna say there was a giant area in the cities for people of giant bodies like Mount Lady in her giant form and all the other gigantification people. And Deku, he has a special thing he has to do, so yeah. So he always looks just like that because he's a giant. And basically, all the time he's oversized compared to people. I mean, it's kind of obvious. And by the time he's 4, he's already 7 foot tall and covered in muscles because I'm going to say the gigantification quirk just makes you more muscular as well. So when he hits 14, he's a giant and he sits like next to the school building with the window open and a speaker so he can hear it. And the teacher is just like, wow, my class has a literal giant in it. Whatever. And he can stand next to school buildings like they're normal things. He reaches up to like 50 feet, I guess. I'm not really sure how tall he would be. Being that like people who are like 6 foot are like ants to him, I'm gonna say he's really giant. Not quite sure how tall, but yeah, really tall. And he does normal human workouts, but people look at him like he's a monster compared to because his size. And his strength is immense. When he sees All Might, something different happens with a Sledge villain. It tries hiding on top of Deku, and Deku just straight flicks it off like a booger. And the Sledge villain gets hit by All Might, even though this flick was enough to send it flying into the ground like it was a ant. And Deku asked if he could be a hero with such a pointless quirk. And All Might said it's not pointless, and you could, but it'd be very difficult. So he gets training from 2 people, Mount Lady and All Might. And All Might, Deku is offered one for all, and Deku simply says no. And he says, but I will take it. I won't use it, but I'll take it. And when I meet someone worthy, I'll give it to them. Problem is, he doesn't find anyone worthy enough to use it, so he trains his body even more. Bago has a lot more respect for him because he knows that the story of David and Goliath ain't gonna work with Deku because Deku could straight up just say stomp and crush him. So he doesn't really do that. And if you're wondering, Deku is more of a close range fighter, but with the length of his arms, he can just go from like almost a mile away with his jumps. So he's pretty tough too. Normal bullets won't affect him. He's like, he's super durable. He's basically the equivalent of a mountain compared to ants. Now, yes, if you're saying ants can pierce a mountain if it takes them a while, yes, that's what it would do with Deku. It would take about 3 hours for them to even land a scratch on him. So Deku, when he meets Mineta early in this version, and I'm gonna say he met Mount Lady, and he's a big fan of Mount Lady, even though he towers above her in height. And strength-wise, he towers above everyone but All Might. And All Might is like, oh, outgunned because of the length of Deku's arms. And this is Prime All Might we're talking about, not the decrepit old All Might that is there today in the anime, so yeah. And when she met a fellow giant, because she calls herself a giant because of her quirk, which her quirk allows her to become giant, so, and it'll last for a while, and yeah, so, if you'll know what the ship is for this, it's actually Mount Lady, because the age for consent in Japan is 13, I'm gonna say that's how it is in canon as well, and it's gonna be like that in this version. So, she doesn't become a teacher at UA, but she knows that it'd be fine because of his age. And if you're wondering how Deku does everything, he just has to have supersized versions of everything. I'm gonna say there's people with, like, growing quirks that can grow things to abnormal sizes. There's, like, farmers with gigantification things for their crops, and they use that, and Deku gets special food because of his abnormal size. And if you're wondering what this dude has to do to get some good old water, well, that's quite simple. He relies on people with water quirks. Pure water quirks, so he can drink that. And he knows about Endeavor. He's actually met Endeavor before, because I'm gonna say when his quirk had awakened, it was when he was like, it was a mutation quirk, so he was normal size when he was born, but then he just grew massively, and he towered over grown men when he was young, so he already towered over Endeavor before he was even went to the quirk doctor. So they have to give Deku an ultra-sized version of everything that they're using, which is why I'm going to introduce a new character into the anime, which is my own character. He's buff, he's 6'3", and he's a master of all martial art. I'm basically making what I want my perfect self to be like. So, sorry guys, I'm doing that. And Deku, I'm gonna say that I'm not gonna change the quirks of Deku's parents, but I'm gonna say that Inko has a lot of trouble with being around Deku, so she basically has to have him lay down, and so she could climb on top of him to get on his shoulders to speak with him because of his abnormal size. So UA, I'm going to say, has the same thing as in canon, a giant door. Deku can't fit in though, so basically they have a giant window that opens for Deku, and they have to mess with a lot of material to make Deku's desk and everything so it's weatherproof and all that. So they made a giant area for Deku alone. Cementos helped make it, and yeah. So that's how Deku got dealing with that. And he had picked up all the trash off that beach just because he doesn't like trash on beaches because he thinks nature is beautiful. So, yeah, the person with gigantification quirk is basically what I'm going to characterize as he basically makes everything giant. And when the villain attack happens, Deku is standing up right next to the building of UA with his head above it. It's about his shoulder height tall, so he looks down saying, that he saw who did it, and he pointed at Shigaraki, and Shigaraki tried running. Deku straight just took a jump, didn't even jump, he just took a step, and was already past Shigaraki. Shigaraki tries to disintegrate Deku. Deku straight just kicks him like a football. Which, yes, I know in America it's called soccer, and if you're wondering, I am from America, but Yeah, he kicks him like a soccer ball. Anyway, Shigaraki doesn't get caught since he just gets teleported away by Kurigiri. And so when Deku was enrolling into UA, here's how well it goes. He walks in there and he's standing right next to the building, hearing President Mike and all that. And when they let him into the city, he straight up just blitzes by and stomps out most of the robots. And then when that final 0-pointer came along, he knew that he was basically behind a lot because he didn't crush that many robots. He just threw a couple. And he took a couple hits and other people to kill the robots. So Deku, when he sees the 0-pointer, he rears his arm back. And punches it when he heard Uraraka. And he picks up all the rubble with 2 fingers and sees if she's alright and picks her up with his hand and just takes her to the infirmary by just walking and knocking on the window. Which is basically how he has to talk to do everything. His school, knock on the window, they open it up. Literally everything is just opening a window for him to see. And Deku, he has trouble hiding himself, to say the least, but actually, you know what? I'm gonna say he can shrink down. It's similar to Mount Lady's quirk, so yeah. But he got buff anyway, since I want him to be able to actually fit in with some people. So yeah. Deku can go shrink down, but he can also get massive, and yeah. And for his training, he has to try holding his giant form, which he can hold it for a solid 2 days, but he doesn't tell people this. When he got into UA, he saw that was gonna happen, and he wasn't using any giant powers, he was just using physical strength. Then he used his giant form and crushed the 0-pointer. And he shrunk back down to get he was still giant to get Uraraka to the nurse's office. Then he shrunk back down. So, yeah. And I'm gonna say that he, like Ant-Man, he keeps a crazy amount of strength for no matter what shape he's in. So he can actually shrink down into the size of a pebble, but he doesn't do that ever. Nah, he doesn't shrink. He just gigantifies all the time. And his training is with gigantification, and he thought that this was his only thing, so yeah. And he's able to pick entire, like, buildings up with one hand, so ain't no one anyway gonna be in danger. I'm gonna say Deku takes one for all and winds up saying, who should I give it to? I'm already a giant, I don't need much strength since I'm already strong enough to keep up with Prime All Might. He chooses Mineta and trains Mineta. If you're wondering why is the smallest dude and the giantest dude and the giant dude standing next to each other, it's because Mineta's like an ant compared to Deku, and Deku wants to train him on how to fight, and he does, and Mineta is actually able to stop Deku's punches with his hands. But when he got one for all, he was actually an equivalent match for Deku with 100%. But Deku, unlike Canon All Might, inspires Mineta to become the strongest one there is. Which, if you're wondering, yes, Deku did get one for all and used it a couple times, but when he gave it to Mineta was grateful and knew that he was not going to be technically as strong as
Deku because Deku doing push-ups does the same effect as anything else, so yeah. And if he does push-ups in his giant form, he gets the effects of doing a ton of push-ups in his small form. So, yeah. When they start getting to... They do the USJ, and Deku winds up buffing up and throwing the Nomu around. And using one for all. Doesn't use one for all, he just uses his monstrous strength. And then he gets gigantified to fight for a while. And then when they have the whole, like, training stuff they do for the sports festival, here's how that goes. He just busts out of there with his super strength and just says, okay, and became gigantified and jumped and was able to land right in the finish line area before anyone else. His time, 2 seconds. And then he just walks to the rest of the finish line since he didn't really care. The cavalry battle, his team is the same as in canon. But in this version, they're actually all on his shoulders. And he gets gigantified, and anytime someone goes to try grabbing the headbands, they just get swatted down like flies. So Deku does the same thing as in canon and gets the same points. I'm going to say that when Deku had gotten the, superpowers that he has, he learns a lot more. If you're wondering what I mean, he has the ability of super brilliance with his super size. And he picks actual buildings up when need be. But here's how the final thing happens. Deku just starts going ham on Shinso. Shinsu tries telling Deku what to do and tells him to gigantify because he knows it's too big for the ring. Deku just stayed shrunken down and just punched Shinso around and knocked him out of the ring. Then you have the fight against Todoroki. Here's how well that goes. Fire and ice. He tells Todoroki to not hold back, and he throws monster giant punches that are sending Todoroki's eyes chipping away. Todoroki asks how he does that. He thought he was just a giant. And Deku said, I have the strength of my giant form when I'm in any form. I just use that one to get to far places faster. And then just goes ham and actually beats him because of the absolute weight that he just used. By that I mean he straight up just stood on one foot, both his feet dug into the arena, and became giant. And then you have the whole fighting against teachers happens differently. In this version, it's Endeavor, Deku, Bakugo, and it's actually Todoroki, Deku, Bakugo, and Mineta. So, Momo and the Tape Dude are actually going to be together in this version. They're going to be going up against, being that there's 4 students and 2 teachers, I'm going to say they throw Midnight in there, and actually they're going to throw, Mount Lady in there with the whole gigantification that Deku has. So they're all fighting, and here's how it goes. The heroes are all together, the pros are together all at the finish line. Deku just goes gigantify, sends All Might around a couple times. And he knows he's too big to get the cuffs on him, so he just starts going ham on all three of these heroes. Todoroki, Mineta, and Bakugo focus on getting them all cuffed, which is hard because of, hold on a second guys, the gigantification of Mount Lady, so Deku just has that special handcuffs that were gigantified, so he could handcuff her, and then his handcuffs will shrink down to whoever has them on, so Deku was able to put them on her, and they would shrink to her size. Hold up a second. So, yeah. And then, I'm going to say that they go to the training camp, and being that it was Aizawa versus Tape and Creation, Aizawa was still lost because he was holding back the same way that the other teachers had to. Only All Might and Mount Lady and Endeavor threw their weights off halfway through against Deku so they could actually get an even fight. And being that Deku alone took down 3 top powered heroes, they chose to let him go down that hill on his own. One call, he was not allowed to use his gigantification, because he had to seem as if it was normal to go in his small form. And he said, okay. And when he fights those things, he straight up just destroys them all. This is another set going to be made for the rest of Class 1A, but he got there in like 2 minutes, so they were all amazed. That cat chick was impressed. And Mount Lady, I'm going to say, was there because she had to help train Deku with his gigantification quirk, which he knew as his quirk was called Giant. Actually, I'm going to say his quirk was called Goliath. And he said, like David and Goliath, he says the doctor had told him no, because you're a Goliath among men. And Deku basically has to have help training, so people actually stand on his back with all of their powers trying to keep him down. I'm gonna say Todoroki makes a giant. I'm gonna say that Momo made a giant blanket, and she made she helps make weights for Deku because she is the only one who has the creation quirk. She makes small weights for Deku, and they say blah blah tons. So for every one that would weigh a pound, I make them, well, my character thing makes them 1 ton. So they'll say for if it was 1 pound, it was 1 ton. So yeah, he has an entire giant bench press thing that he puts on his back and carries around. Which I'm going to take something from Dragon Ball here, capsules. I'm going to make the quirk of the guy I have 2 things. He has the ability to put things into capsules. They just pop and throw. And his other ability is to enlarge things that are tiny, which he can do quite easily, both of those things. So, I'm going to say that Deku still trained hard, and he was able to actually get strong enough to where he could fight harder. And the All for One fight goes a lot different than it had in goes different than it was in canon. So they don't catch Bakugo, In fact, Deku just giants up and just kicks Shigaraki in the face. Well, technically in the hands. All of the hands at once because of his giant foot. And Dabi goes to throw flames at Deku and saying even giants can get burned. Deku moves to the side and just slaps the flames right back down to the ground. Then he just knocks Dabi out. They all make it out of there, but Bakugo is safe. I'm going to say that there was still the dragger thing that happened. In this version, Deku was asked to go with the heroes in case something happens. And him and Mount Lady had actually gotten a thing that happened where they were actually a couple now. And whenever he saw that Mount Lady got hit by All For One, he blitzed over there and started turning All For One into a stress reliever. One of those crushy stress balls that you crush repetitively to get calm. He basically turns All For One into one of those. And All For One thinks he's all high and mighty until he starts getting crushed by a guy who's like 14. So he starts getting absolutely destroyed. And then when they try to go get their hero license, here's how that goes. Deku, when those, basically it goes someone else in canon. Since Deku's a giant target, he has to have giant plates, and if you're wondering, he's gonna have to go in his small form for all the stuff. Since if he goes giant, it would make it very difficult to hit him. So Deku starts just sending people flying with. So when that same thing happened with those like pretend villains happened. In this version, All Might, Endeavor, both of them assist because they know that Deku's going to be there and they're trying to step up the game. And Power Loader is going to be there too. And that's the dude from the beginning of the anime who catches that weird thing that fell. So Deku, he knows that there's going to be 4 pro leading heroes. So that dude, he says, listen dude, you shake the ground, I take these 4 on. And he looks at Todoroki and that wind dude, and he said, you two, I want you two to start sending air and flames and ice all at these weaklings and help this dude recover if he gets a headache. And they say, okay, and Todoroki, and then Deku goes to fighting 4 pro heroes with these superpowers. He slaps Endeavor around like he's nothing. He slaps the whale dude around like he's nothing. And Power Loader is a lot weaker. So, yeah, these 3 get slapped around like they ain't nothing. All Might gets slapped around, but he ain't being treated like nothing. He's being treated like a good fight. And then it's a 4-on-1 all at once. Deku just straight slaps them all at once. I noticed that didn't work because they all had their guards up. Now they're just fighting at full strength, and Deku just straight goes 100%, threw his shirt off and starts wrecking them all with punches, and gigantified up and just starts crushing them around like they're nothing. And then he proceeds to keep rescuing people after training the villains up and getting them out of there. So, yeah. That was, oh yeah, there's still an area to go through, so they have the whole thing where they're trying to get there, and I'm going to say that Deku hadn't given Mineta that power and he said he was considering Mineta for it. Mineta did not get it though, so yeah, Mineta just worked for training people up because of his quirk. And I'm going to say that after Overhaul happened and shot that dude with the quick erasing bullet, he shot Lemillion. So Deku gave him one for all. And he said, "What? Why?" And Deku said, "Because you need it. It's a quirk that basically enhances your physical ability, being that you're quirkless now." He said, "Okay, but how do I use it?" He said, "You should be able to use a lot of it by now, so I'll train you in how to use it." And when he had fought in the entire class, here's how well that goes. Everyone, and then Deku just slaps him around. And then you have the part where the airy fight thing. In this version, Deku just straight up kicks through the entire place and grabs the dude. I mean, in not a sense kick through it, but when all the walls kept going up, he just kept kicking them down. And I'm going to say that Night Eye does not die because Deku just stomps the ground and breaks all the ice, all the rock things. And then, and if you're wondering why I didn't mention much about the fight with Stain, it's because he can't really go into small places, so when Stain attacked him, he just got slapped around in small form. Yeah. Anyway, Deku, he trains a lot, and Eri helps Eri with her quirk by giving her a rotten apple, and her using her quirk on it and bringing it back. And she could fast forward it and bring it back, and she does this repetitively, and it was even able to get Lemillion his quirk back. And Lemillion gave Deku one for all every time they did that, but that was because they didn't want to lose one for all. So, yeah. Deku gave that to someone who he thought could use it. The, Lemillion didn't really need it, but he wound up giving it to Mineta because Mineta was trained with Lemillion and Deku, so he's now a perv in this version. And that's just because he's the only one I think really needs it. Actually, I'm thinking. Yeah, no, Mineta will not get one for all. It's Invisigirl. If you're wondering why her, because think about it. She uses a low percentage. She could hit a ton of villains. But no, not her. He winds up. Who should I give it to? Yeah. I'm going to say that he just gave it to himself in the end, so now his punches pack an extra big old whop of power. Now he just lives happily ever after as the giant of all giants. And after high school, he winds up marrying Mount Lady. They have giant kids that are going to go to UA. So, yeah. Later, Slick Kingdom.